The Nerdcast Empire is on the air. We are back, and it is episode 100 of the Nerdcast Empire. I am Matt in the studio. Great to have you along with us. We have made it to the triple-digit mark, a project that started late last summer, has made it past the 1 year mark, was our first big milestone, and now we have made it to 100 episodes of the Nerdcast Empire, and almost fitting that we have one of our kind of keystone episodes that we have, Music Weekly, to anchor that 100th episode with episode 33 of Music Weekly on this Sunday night live on twitch.tv/nerdcastempire. Of course, we're here each and every Sunday night with live music each and every Sunday. Joining me in studio, as he has done for all 100 episodes up to this point, is Mike. Mike, how's it going?
Oh, man, I have not had perfect attendance in so many years. This is exciting. Yeah, episode 100. When we set out to start doing this, it was really kind of about how do we find the right format for kind of all of our interests to have a dedicated presence here on our podcast. And I think the music episode was kind of the easiest to arrive as far as getting that format. Yeah, we got September 13th music today. There was some decent stuff out there. Kind of excited to talk about it.
Yeah, we're going to, certainly in our second portion of our program, we're going to kind of take a look at the 100, or the current stuff. But in the beginning part, we're going to talk a little bit about the 100th episode. Joining us from Parts Unknown is Chris. Chris, how's it going?
Definitely a cause for celebration here, even with a torrential downpour outside. But yeah, happy we made it to the big triple digits. I feel like even though we're still growing, we've accomplished a lot in a short span of time. And I can't wait to talk about what's went right and where we hope to go from here.
Yeah, no question. There's so much we plan to do and so many things we have done. We certainly we'll look ahead at some point, but certainly want to kind of take this opportunity to look back at where we have come. And, I was talking to Nate Metz, who, of course, is the guy who's in charge of Stoveleg Media, who I thank each and every episode for helping support the podcast. And he reminded me yesterday that the average podcast lasts 7 episodes. So we've gone way past that. We have succeeded because obviously a lot of people start it and they do a couple episodes and they drop it and that's the end of it. We have managed to continue on all the way to 100. So big thanks, obviously, to the guys, to Rachel, who's joining us in the chat.
Yeah.
Big thanks to Stoveleg Media for kind of helping us get off the ground and doing all that. A big thanks to everybody who has watched us live, who has watched us the VODs, who has commented. We've got some great comments on our YouTube channel this week talking about OhioCon, which is great, and we'll delve more into that topic on Thursday. But big thanks to everyone, whether if you've bought things from our store, or if you've checked out any of our episodes, we're incredibly grateful. A lot of things we want to do and continue to grow as we head into the next 100 episodes. And the biggest thing we want to continue to emphasize is, number one, you never have to spend a dime on us. If you can share our posts, if you can tell your friends, tell your enemies, let us know, let everybody know we're out here. That's the biggest thing you can do to help us out. And number two, let us know if you're listening from somewhere. If you can't join us live, shoot us a message. Reach out to us on social media. If there are things you like, if there are things you want to see us do, if there's music you hear that you want us to spotlight, let us know. We want this to be a two-way street. And with that in mind, very, very soon we're going to be getting our Discord up and running. We'll be promoting that here on the podcast as well, so people will be able to reach out to us a little more directly to kind of give their feedback on what we're doing. So a lot of really great stuff. We're really excited about that. And I guess we just want to start off with just a very brief segment. On Thursday, when we do what is typically our Anime Thursdays, we're going to get a little more into detail on kind of the first 100 episodes and what we've learned and, advice maybe for other people looking to start a podcast. We want to kind of keep it more music focused in general on this episode. We're going to talk in a moment about some of our favorite bands that we've talked about over this 100 episodes. But I want to start, and we'll start with Mike, because here in studio, just kind of generally just some thoughts on, getting to this point, maybe what you've learned, what the process has been like for you, kind of being a part of this all the way through episode 100.
Yeah, it's been a process, to say the least. I think for me, the first 100 episodes was really about kind of finding my footing and kind of becoming more acquainted with commentary. We don't all broadcast sports as like a side gig, so that's not something that was really just came naturally to me. So it was a matter of really getting used to that having something to say, knowing when to say what, and just kind of keeping the conversation going. And I think all these weeks later, it's I've seen some progress. And kind of to my earlier point, I think it was also about finding a format that you can easily repeat. Thankfully, I like listening to new music and talking about new music. So how do we put that into an easily repeatable 60 to 90 minute podcast each week?
Yeah, I think that's both of those things I think are very true. I think everybody has really come along as you get to use this skill. It does develop. It's one of those things like public speaking that you really only get good at it if you do it. It's not one of those you can read a book or watch YouTube videos. You actually have to practice it to get better at it. And I think everybody has. And yeah, this music show has kind of been the linchpin of this podcast because it has been something that's been easily repeatable. It does take a lot of work to put it together, but it's in the end, it is very formulaic, which makes it very easy to do it each and every week and kind of get into that rhythm. So before I give my thoughts, Chris, I want to throw it to you in parts unknown. First off, glad that you were able to get off overtime just in the nick of time for episode 100, at least give you a little bit of a break. But yeah, your thoughts on this whole project so far. Obviously, we're still in, I think, our very early stages.
Infancy
of what we're doing. But your thoughts on kind of getting to this point in episode 100 and passing the 1 year mark and all that good stuff.
Yeah, from kind of a personal standpoint of mine, I mean, as I'm not necessarily an old man by any means, but starting to notice I'm getting up there. I kind of had this personal goal just to eventually hit that point where I'm able to reach other people through some sort of creative process, writing, music, whatever it may be. And I've dabbled in that here and there, but I never seem to give myself any kind of scheduled time to really sit down and, for one, enjoy the things that I like to listen to, watch, whatever it may be, but also to create things. So this has been kind of a conduit for both of those. We'll mention it, I'm sure, over the next couple episodes in our multiple genres, but it's gotten me to watch so much more anime than I have as of late, listen to so many bands that I would have never been introduced to otherwise, and it's gotten me back into pro wrestling. And now we have this creative endeavor where we're actually reaching people. I mean, we don't have an insane group that listens to us by any means number wise, but we've got people out in Sweden listening to us, in Japan, and just the individuals that here and there that I'm able to see, like, hey, they've heard our voice, they saw something they liked, or they heard something they like. It's kind of wild to me even now.
Yeah, I think that was the one thing I think was a little unexpected is how many people we would reach. And again, the numbers maybe aren't like a huge number of people, but reaching, hearing from these bands all across the world, hearing from listeners that have something to say, and it's just kind of wild. And again, it's very small still, but like those interactions are really valuable because it does mean that the work you put in, somebody actually cares enough to respond to it and reply. And I think the biggest thing is, we have talked for years about, hey, we need to do something. We'll go you go to an anime convention and we come out of the anime convention, hey, we need to do something. And then we don't really do anything just because life happens and you kind of get busy on other things and you never come back to it. And this was really the first opportunity that we're like, hey, we're going to do something. And the podcast is always going to kind of be what got this thing rolling along. But the vision is that we're all going to be able to do our own creative things, whether it's do YouTube videos, whether it's a stream on Twitch, whether it's whatever it might be, and that they all kind of live under this Nerdcast umbrella that we have. And we all kind of come together for the podcast to do these things, but it's the goal was that the individual members would also find that creativity to maybe take up the things that they have been putting off for so long. Because again, like you said, getting up there in age, Mr. Young Guy, like we're all, we're all certainly headed that direction. And the older you get, the more you understand that, like, the clock is ticking for everybody. Obviously, you hope that the clock's got lots and lots of time on it, but nobody really knows. So you don't want to be sitting there 20, 30 years from now and just think, man, I wish I would have done that one thing. And that was, to me, a big impetus, like, hey, it's time for me to, because, I'll admit, I have thrown a decent amount of money behind this with no real immediate thought of making any of that money back. But it was one of those things like, hey, we gotta put a little money into this and a little time and a little effort to get this thing off the ground and finally do the thing that we keep talking about doing. And and honestly, it's been very rewarding just to kind of see it all kind of, come together and continue to grow even after 100 episodes.
It's funny. You mentioned the average podcast only lasts 7 episodes. And I think kind of to Chris's point, when you talk about just the following we built up to this point, I think for some people that's enough reason to quit after 7 episodes. I don't think they really have the perspective to say, you've recorded 7 episodes of a podcast. Why should anyone just immediately flock to you and say, hey, this person's opinion is important enough for me to devote time every week to listen to them? I think it's a long battle to build that level of authority. And if you don't really enjoy just sitting around and talking about your hobbies and your interests, I don't think you can make it doing this.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely, it takes some time, and it does take a little bit of work to kind of put your thoughts together. And I'll admit, like our first podcast, because I edited everything pretty heavily when we first started. We recorded 4 episodes, and I won't get too deep into this because I want to save some of this for Thursday, but I really did go through and edit with a fine-tooth comb to try to make them sound as flawless as possible, because you just think, hey, I want this to be very polished coming out. And I think if I don't edit like that now because we do so much of this live, it's like, well, the live thing is kind of the experience now. So
that's out there. So
yeah, so there's no sense in me going back and creating a fake version of it. But I think if I did have to go back and do that now, it would be so much easier because our podcast flows so much better and everybody's much more confident in the way they speak. There's a lot more planning. It's become old hat. I mean, everybody kind of knows how this works. And I think because of it, the end process and end product is a lot better at the end. But it's been a lot of fun, and I've enjoyed it, and I'm excited to see where it goes. I think there are a lot of things we'd like to do, and we're all doing this on the side, so it kind of happens sometimes in little baby steps, and that's okay. But we appreciate everybody who's been along for the ride, and we're excited to see what we're going to do. And again, if you have ideas, things you'd like to see us do or talk about or whatever it may be, reach out to us or join us live. We're live twice a week, usually Thursdays and Sundays, 7 p.m. Eastern time in the U.S. Join our chat, reach out to us, and we'll certainly listen to what you have to say and try to make some changes. So that is kind of a preview of the 100th episode. Obviously, we want to talk a little bit about the music from these 100 episodes. And Mike, I know you have some stats before we kind of get into some of the bands. We won't go too deep into this because, again, I don't want this to be a 90-minute podcast. But I do want to kind of talk about some of the stats you have on these, what has primarily been 33 weeks out of the 100 episodes that we have done this music podcast. And as I mentioned, each and every week you put together the new releases, and some weeks that's 40 or 50 albums. Some weeks it's over 100 albums. And then we go through and pick bands that we like, and we're going to do that again in the second part of this show. But you have some stats kind of talking about what that looks like over 100 episodes of a podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. And this kind of ties into the enjoying what you do, listening to new music and talking about new music, because, every week I do, from a couple websites, pull a list of weekly new releases, and I go through YouTube and I check out every single one of them that I can find, which is usually the vast majority. And then from there, I kind of rank them, and then we whittle it down into what ends up ultimately being the picks we have each week. But because of that, I'm listening to at least a song from so many albums.
Some of them are bad.
Absolutely. There are far more that I'm not a fan of than those I am a fan of. But kind of to get into those numbers, I've broken down our spreadsheet by quarter. So in the first quarter, January through March, there were 770 albums. Quarter 2, we had 1,164. And where we're at now, kind of nearing the end of the third quarter, we're at 573. So for the first 100 episodes, that means I've listened to a song off of roughly 2,507 albums since the start of this.
That's a lot of albums for sure.
Yeah, it really is. And as far as our picks go, we've selected 179 new albums from the course or over the course of the podcast. That's 70 from me, 70 from you, 32 from Chris. And then there was the one week that just had an exceptional amount of music, and we had 7 bonus picks that week. And then each week we have a vault selection, and that's over the course of the music episodes, that's totaled 85 vault picks, 34 from me, 37 from you, and 14 from Chris. So, Yeah, it's been a lot of music.
It has, and it's been a lot of bands that we would not have been exposed to otherwise, and that's been the most fun thing about this is these bands, especially when you find these bands that have been doing it for 40 years,
Yeah.
and you didn't really know who they were, and now you find out they're not only still doing it, but they're doing it at a high level. Like, that's really cool, and then it's also cool to see young guys and gals out there performing the kind of music that you've loved your whole life, and you just think nobody's out there playing this music, and yes, there are bands out there playing this music and doing it really well, so that's really cool as well.
Yeah, it's been a big one for me. It's just not realizing that there were this many people playing music I still enjoy because, if you're into a certain type of rock music, you just don't really find it anywhere. And going back into those picks, we have, let's see, out of those 179, we have a total of, whoops, get out of there, 31 different countries that we've spotlighted. Obviously, the most being from the United States, which isn't too surprising. But 13% of them have come from Sweden, and almost 9% from Germany. So we've definitely got some hotbeds of music that we enjoy. And as far as within the United States, a quarter of the picks we've had in the United States have been from California. So
kind of makes sense. A lot of music still being performed out there, but
absolutely.
But yeah, so it's pretty wild. Like Rachel says in the chat, like it is hard to find new music, and you do have to kind of look for it because the radio stations basically play the same music over and over again. It's the biggest of the big bands, and the small bands have a hard time breaking through. But that's been the goal of the podcast. Let's find some new stuff that people don't spotlight, and let's talk about it. So we'll start with Chris, because I know you've had a chance maybe to kind of pull a couple of the bands that over the length of the podcast that you really enjoyed. What were some of the ones, whether you picked them or one of our picks, that you really dug in this first 100 episodes?
Yeah, like Mike mentioned, I didn't have as many to sift through as far as ones I've picked, missing out on some episodes here and there, but I was able to pick out just a big set of 5 that not only do I still listen to, but it kind of showed to me how important this podcast was as far as branching out and finding these other acts. Number 1 was Bokassa. That was probably the top band as far as bands I wouldn't have found if we weren't doing this, and they blew me away, and I have no idea how I hadn't heard of them, especially when they were already opening for acts like Metallica, or they were picked out by Metallica. Red Temple Prey, great alternative selection that allowed us to showcase a local band from our state, which is a big reason why we jumped into this in the first place, was to kind of highlight some of these bands that are around us that might not get named as often as they should. Tigers on Opium was another one. This was an instance of me kind of branching out genre-wise. It was slated as kind of a stoner metal band, but they kind of broke that mold for me, and they exemplified just so many more genres than just that. Skrikidlin, that was another one, branching out to Sweden, and that was looking into a band that had a total package. They had a sci-fi novel behind their album, a video game that they created, and just showed all this creativity that a band can put out, and really just needs to be on the forefront, and I wish more bands would do it. And then lastly, I kind of wanted to show some of these solo acts. We talk every now and then about these solo artists that show up, and even without a whole band behind them, are able to just put on some amazing albums. So Martin Gonzalez was a big one for me, not just how amazing he is at music, but the fact that it was able to tie together our love of music as well as anime with some of the work that he's done behind the scenes and working for some of these studios.
Yeah, all great picks for sure. Definitely enjoyed all those bands. Mike, I know you've pulled some bands as well. And again, it's impossible to narrow this down to 5 just because we've heard so much good music. But what were some of the ones that maybe stood out to you?
Yeah, it's impossible to narrow it down. And honestly, some of the more recent picks, I'm still kind of in the process of digesting. Some of these other bands I've been listening to since January, so they've had kind of that time advantage. With that in mind, a couple of the early ones from that first music episode that we did under this format for January, we had Mega Colossus with their album Showdown.
Yeah.
It's really cool, kind of melodic, traditional metal from Raleigh, North Carolina. Kind of one of those first bands that I found that I'm like, wow, there are people out here making this music still, like current bands. I had no idea. And still really dig that album. Another one from that episode was the band Striker and their album Ultra Power. really cool kind of traditional power speed hair metal, essentially, from Edmonton. Really cool throwback to like 80s style stuff. Their album feels like it should be an 80s movie soundtrack. So that was definitely really cool. Moving on to February, we had Blood Opera and their album Songs in the Key of Death. Always a big fan of like horror punk, horror rock, and that's kind of what they are from Toronto, Ontario. They got this really cool like horror aesthetic, like Gwar or Lordy, with a backstory and just a little more of a pop sensibility to their music, which I also really dig. And kind of in that similar vein, from June 21st episode, we had Floating Worlds and their album Skywatcher. Just really cool Athens, Greece-based synthwave, symphonic rock, power pop band. And again, this one, full-on concept album, feels like the music score to whatever the concept movie ultimately would have been. Just so cool. Like the best parts of 80s music kind of rolled into this one modern album. Really loved it. And finally, from that same week was the band Vexing Hex and their album Solvet Coagula. This is a band from Illinois. They are a doom, goth, alternative, occult, grunge, pretty much every kind of subgenre you could pick, and also kind of classic rock at the same time. They got a really cool backstory too, and a look about them. Kind of like a Ghost feel, but I felt back then, and I still think that their music has a lot more going on than what you hear from Ghost. I think it's just more of a complete product, but yeah, just another really awesome band.
Yeah, all great choices for sure. Again, it's hard to narrow this down to 5, but I tried to go back to some of the older episodes as well, just to kind of remember some bands that maybe I'd forgotten about or hadn't really had the chance to go back to, but the first one was in the End Machine with the album The Quantum Phase. This was a George Lynch project. They'd kind of gone through some different singers. They brought in Girish Pradhan for this album, and he just absolutely killed it. A lot of these are going to be melodic / AOR bands because, again, didn't realize how much of that was out there. Man, there's a ton of it, and a lot of it's really good. That was really good. That was back from our March episode, March 24th. Ozhal Peterson's Rendezvous was a self-titled album that was really good, known as the Blindfolded Recording Artist, the Blindfold Dead. I want to make sure I emphasize that. Blindfold Dead recording artist. Just an outstanding AOR album that was really, really catchy and really strong. Another one with a different name, A Never-Ending John's Dream, Coming Back to Paradise, featured on the May 5th episode. Melodic rock band from Barcelona, Spain. Really enjoyed their stuff as well. Universe 3 with their self-titled album on June the 2nd. Originally founded as Universe back in 1982.
Oh, yeah.
Another band that had been around for a long time, and here they came back after kind of breaking up a couple of times and just absolutely killed it with some great rock. And then one of the ones that just, there have been a few over the months, and I'm sure as I go back and look at more of them, there'll be more that jump to the forefront. But really one of those bands that absolutely blew me away was the band Nestor and their album Teenage Rebel. Because as I said at the time, if you listen to this album and don't know anything else about these guys, you just think these guys were born and raised somewhere in the Midwest U.S. They went
to the Sunset Strip in 1984 to make it big.
Yeah, you just felt like that's where it was. But no, this is a band formed in Sweden in 1989, but their first album didn't come out until 2021. But you listen to it, and it just sounds like Americana, which again kind of reminds you that the world's a smaller place than necessarily we think it is sometimes. But it's just there's been so much good music, and again, at some point we'll maybe even do a deeper dive into some of the bands that we really like. That's just a quick 5 from each of us, kind of talking about some of those bands that really made an impact over 100 episodes.
Got the vinyl of the Nestor album. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's such a really cool production, but yeah, good stuff.
Everything about that was so well done. So kudos to them once again. So that's kind of our music look at 100 episodes. And again, coming up Thursday night on what is normally our Anime Thursdays, we're going to kind of get more into 100 episodes, kind of how this all came about, our advice to people looking to start a podcast, just the general stuff. We'll also have some other news items, including the latest on OhioCon. Update, we'll talk a little bit about the NXT on CW, which is coming up this Tuesday night. We'll review that on Thursday. So that'll all come up on Thursday night when we reconvene for the Nerdcast Empire. Before we get to our new music of the week, Mike and I had a chance to go see a concert on Tuesday night down at the Taft Theater in Cincinnati. and absolutely blown away by Living Color and Extreme. One of the best concerts I've seen. I haven't been in a while since I've really had a chance to see a concert, but this is one of the better ones I've seen in a long, long time. First off, the Taft Theater, the first time I've been down there, was really blown away by it. It's a really nice venue. Extreme and Living Color. Let's talk about Extreme first, because I've always been a fan of theirs.
Yeah.
And in fact, just a few weeks ago, I picked Porno Graffiti as
Great album.
as my vault pick and talked about how important that album was. I don't think I appreciated how good Gary Cherone and Nuno Bettencourt are even today. Like, Gary Cherone is just a consummate frontman, just constant energy, just puts on such a great show, and yet he's not really the voice of the band as far as like what you typically see out of a frontman who gets up and tells stories. That's Nuno Bettencourt. He's the one that does all the storytelling, and he absolutely kills that as well, on top of just being a virtuoso guitarist. Mike, your thoughts on Extreme, who, to me, as the dogs get excited, your thoughts on Extreme and just what kind of show they put on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of interesting because I didn't know that Nuno Bettencourt was like the mouthpiece of the band either. Honestly, I see him now way more often than I ever did before the concert. I don't know if maybe this is just on the heels of his appearance at the Super Bowl halftime show, but it's like now I've seen he's done interviews with Rick Beato. He was on this most recent episode of the Nothing But a Good Time documentary. It's like I'm seeing him all over the place. It's kind of wild. And you mentioned Gary Cherone being the kind of the consummate front man, and it kind of goes back to talking about doing this podcast and you're not getting any younger. It really just kind of flips that whole idea on its head when you think that man's 63 years old.
Yeah, it's insane.
Like, that's when I used to go and see hair metal bands with our brother years ago. I thought, man, I can't believe those guys are still out there doing that at their age.
They're like 35.
They were probably like 35 to 42 years old, like not even remotely old. So to see Extreme and also Living Color, I mean, taking nothing away from Vernon Reid and Corey Glover, who were just outstanding too, but Extreme kind of with three of their classic members still, Gary Cherone, Nuno Bettencourt, Pat Badger, all late 50s, early 60s. Their drummer's a bit younger, but they all they sounded phenomenal.
And we'll get to Living Color in a moment, because I certainly want to give them their props as well, because they blew me away. But you made a really good point. I think it's important to note for this podcast. I think everybody needs to see a live performance of More Than Words at some point in your music career. And again, we've talked over the years about how some of these ballads kind of pigeonhole these bands, and I think that was one that maybe there was a little bit of resentment toward originally, but now it's like when you see that live, like again, like you said, these guys are in their 50s and 60s, and they're performing that song every bit as well as they performed it 30 years ago. Absolutely blew me away. I mean, the whole concert was amazing. They absolutely killed it. The new stuff sounded really good. I definitely want to get into their new album that I kind of missed out on last year. But More Than Words is almost a spiritual experience, how good it was.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I looked up video to show someone on YouTube of it, and I found one from like a year or two ago, and I swear it didn't sound as good as it did the other night at the concert live. Like, I don't know if they've upped their game since then, or if it was just the limitations of YouTube as opposed to hearing it live. But yeah, that whole thing, you had Nuno playing his instrumental Midnight Express, which for an acoustic instrumental is one of the most wild things I've ever heard. That was off their Waiting for the Punchline album. Definitely check that out, because that's just so cool sounding.
Yeah.
And then, they kind of transition to a story about More Than Words, and then they sing it, and it's just, it was amazing. I don't know what else to say.
Or they break out into Stairway to Heaven first.
Yeah,
like,
that's not our song.
That's not our song. Wish we'd have wrote that song.
Great song.
This is our song. And then they start into More Than Words. But, Wholehearted, Decadent Dance. I mean, you can look at the set list online. Just blown away by those guys. It was phenomenal. I definitely want to go see them again at some point. Living Color opened, and it was just two bands. And, everybody knows Cult of Personality. And, of course, they absolutely killed that.
Yeah.
But, Again, the way they sounded, the way they played, and they were no nonsense. It wasn't really a lot of chit chat. It was like, let's get through as many songs as we can. They sound amazing. Living Color was, again, you certainly know those guys are getting up there in age as well, but you certainly wouldn't know it by watching them perform because they were outstanding.
Yeah, and going into that, I was really only familiar with their Vivid album, the one with Cult of Personality. So really the only songs I knew were that Funny Vibe and Open Letter to a Landlord, which is my favorite song of theirs.
Yeah.
The live performance of that was amazing too.
Yes.
But yeah, they were just song after song, and most of the time it felt like both the guitarist Vernon Reid and Corey Glover, the singer, were just showing off that they could still do what they do.
Yeah.
Because they brought it to a level that, again, the guitarist Vernon Reid, 66 years old, Corey Glover's 59, like, you wouldn't even believe that. It was just such an outstanding performance.
Corey Glover, I mean, you felt like there was almost a gospel vibe to some of his vocals because it was very much like you would hear in like a Southern church or something like that. But man, his range is incredible. And again, they could have played Cult of Personality like straight down the middle, but no, we're gonna just play this as outrageously as possible just to show off that, like, hey, he can hit all the notes and he can hit additional high notes, and Vernon Reid can just continue to kill it on guitar. Like, everybody should see those guys, and it would not shock me at all to see them show up at WrestleMania next year to play CM Punk to the ring, because they sound every bit as good now as they did the last time they did that, which was probably 10, 15 years ago.
Now, it is worth pointing out on his Wikipedia page that it says Corey Glover is also known as Reverend Daddy Love. So there you go. Clearly some sort of church relationship there.
That's fantastic. I love it.
Good times.
Those guys, both bands, outstanding. The Taft Theater, I was really nice, very easy neighborhood to get in and out of. Great parking garage.
Built in 1928. They don't make buildings like that anymore.
They don't. And we sat up in the balcony. And
hello,
echo there from Chris's end. Let's mute that. The balcony seats were really, really outstanding, and you could sit up basically as high up as you want to go, and there's not a bad seat in the house. So really good stuff from those guys, and a really good venue. So we really enjoyed our trip to see just a really outstanding band. So we are on to new music time.
Yeah, we did it.
Before we do that, let's talk about our website, nerdcastempire.com. Of course, you can listen to all of our old podcasts there. You can visit our store. We still have merch out there for the Nerdcast Empire. A reminder, coming up Thursday night, we'll have another episode of Anime Thursdays. And again, we're going to be talking a lot of different topics on Thursdays, so make sure you check us out Thursday night, 7 o'clock Eastern Time. And then we will not have a pay-per-view event next weekend because I will not be here for the Premium Live event. I've got some soccer duties calling, so certainly we'll talk about that on Thursday, kind of preview Bad Blood, which will be coming up next weekend. And, of course, we'll be back with you next Sunday night. The music is September the 20th, which Mike says there's some potential in this.
Sounding pretty good so far.
So we'll take a look at that next week again on the Nerdcast Empire. But it's time to get to our new music this week. Of course, we just explained how this whole thing works. Mike went into pretty good detail, so we don't really need to go through all that again. But we'll let Mike go first, as always, with the new music to talk about the two bands that he picked for this week. So, Mike, what do you got for us?
Yeah, so you mentioned earlier bands that have been doing it for a really long time, and it's good to see them out there doing it. And some maybe you haven't heard of, some you have. I had kind of limited experience with this band, but I saw them on the list and had my hopes up. My first album is the 15th studio album from the American thrash band Flotsam and Jetsam. The album is I Am the Weapon.
Yeah, it's great to see these guys still around, and they still sound fantastic, which is also great to see.
Yeah, I think a lot of people probably, if they do recognize the name of this band, it's mainly because it was the band that Jason Newsted was with originally prior to joining Metallica. He actually wrote almost all the lyrics on their first album in 1986, Doomsday for the Deceiver. I'd also heard one of their early 2000 albums back in the day when I was procuring music online. The album was My God. It was really cool, had some cool tracks on it, but didn't really follow up with them. Band is still led by Eric Knudsen on vocals since 1983. They also have Michael Gilbert on guitars, who was originally in the band from 85 to 97. came back in 2010. Eric's voice kind of makes the difference. The Angry Metal Guy in his review compared him to Joey Belladonna, partially because I guess he discovered the two bands in a similar time frame. I think he's kind of a mix of Belladonna and John Bush, but it definitely works for what they're doing here. Standout tracks include A New Kind of Hero, has this riff that kind of reminds me of Metallica's That Was Just Your Life. Primal, I Am the Weapon, Burn My Bridges, The Head of the Snake, and Gates of Hell. And the song we're going to check out here is the title track, I Am the Weapon.
And a good reminder that, of course, if you're listening on the podcast version, we will not have the audio tracks, so you got to check out the VODs or be with us live to get the song tracks as we play them. So just a reminder of that. So let's check that out now, Flotsam and Jetsam. Their new album, I Am the Weapon. This is the title track off of that album, track number 3. So let's listen to a little bit of that now. I think one thing that every one of these like speed metal bands that we find that play and it sounds like noise could learn from these guys is how to play fast without making it sound like noise. Like you've got the double kicks, you've got all the things that we hear in a lot of these bands, and then it's just like I can't make any of that out. Like it's just indecipherable. Everything here has its place in the mix, and because of that, it makes for a great sound. So that makes a big difference. Chris, your thoughts real quick on Flotsam and Jetsam.
Yeah, it's always nice when I can pick up those classic hints of Maiden or even Judas Priest, but then I can also tell that the band's gone out of their way to do something a little bit where they've added this. It's hard for me to say heavier than Iron Maiden or heavier than Judas Priest, but they do take it a little bit further where some of these speed metal acts try to take it, but they go just a little too far. I think these guys are towing that line perfectly, and they got that healthy mix.
Yeah, no doubt. I thought this was really enjoyable, so definitely check out Flotsam and Jetsam. Great to see them continue to make great music, and that's our first album of the week. As always, you have 2 picks, Mike, so what do you have for us for pick number 2?
Yeah, so going from a band that's been around since the early 80s to a new band. My second band is Vendetta XIII, and this is their debut EP. They're from Los Angeles. They are a hard rock band. The EP is titled Villains and Vices.
It's encouraging that they still use Roman numerals. I feel like nobody knows what Roman numerals are anymore.
Find out how to pronounce that.
And if you're looking for this, it is XIII, as you see on the screen. That is how they have done 13. But I really liked what these guys put out.
Yeah, and the logo looks suspiciously like the Dream Theater logo. Kind of weird, but that's not important. I found the album's press release on MetalDevastationRadio.com. It read, "This highly anticipated album promises to showcase Vendetta XIII's explosive blend of classic and modern influences, delivering a powerhouse of sound that echoes the spirit of legends like Avenged Sevenfold, Guns N' Roses, and Iron Maiden."
I was going to say, let's not shoot too high there.
Yeah, absolutely. And you go to their website, and they definitely list those as influences. Looking at their website, the EP contains 4 new tracks along with 2 singles that were previously released on their Bandcamp. Let's see. What else did I have about these guys? Interview with Breathing the Core. They kind of mentioned that they wanted to label themselves a hard rock band because they find that that's not nearly as limiting as other titles like metal or anything of that nature. They said, if you're hard rock, you can't really be pigeonholed. You can play heavier, you can play more bluesy, and no one's going to cry foul, which, based on what we've seen with bands kind of deviating from metal and kind of how that goes for them, totally makes sense. Let's see, trying to find the important notes of what I take, because I took a lot of notes on these guys, oddly enough. Sometimes modern hard rock can kind of fall flat with me. I find the vocals usually aren't what I'm looking for, but these guys bring it. Like, it doesn't feel douchey, but it doesn't feel like testosterone deficient either. I think they kind of bring both to the table that in healthy doses. You can definitely hear that they've been inspired by Guns N' Roses and Avenged Sevenfold. They even mentioned on their website City of Evil specifically. And I think both those albums kind of had a sound to them, both Appetite for Destruction and City of Evil, where you felt like it was a band trying to create something new with rock that had a little bit of edge to it, maybe more so than what was popular at the time. But yeah, really cool debut EP. I'm kind of excited to hear what they do next. Standout tracks, it's an EP. It's 6 total tracks. Just check the whole thing out. The song I picked to play is the song Devil's Playground. Really cool.
So we're going to check that out now. And it's funny because the YouTube music version of that, I only have 4 songs.
Yeah, so does wherever else I found it. And they mentioned if you buy it, there's actually like the 2 singles that are included as well.
Well, there you go. We're going to check out the opening track, Devil's Playground, from Villains and Vices from Vendetta XIII. Let's listen to a little bit of that now.
Keep on pushing for that thrill, and you will get just what you yearn. We are the answer. We are the ones. Your mommy and daddy won't be around to pick your face up off the ground. Come in, the devil's playground. Come in and play with me. Down the floor in your clothes.
I definitely hear the Avenged Sevenfold comparison.
Yeah.
There's definitely just a rhythm of the songs that very much feels like A7X. But no, these guys sound really great, and certainly looking forward to getting a chance to listen to the whole EP, all 6 songs, when I get a chance to do that. Chris, your quick thoughts on Vendetta 13?
Yeah, one that was on my re-listen list. Was glad that Mike picked them and kind of helped me out there. So thank you for helping me trim down my selection. But yeah, definitely a healthy mix. I felt a little bit of power metal in there, but also some of that gritty side of hair metal. Like I kind of heard a little bit of Skid Row there. So once again, a wide variety in one band. It's always nice to hear.
Yeah, definitely. Really enjoyed that. So
One thing about that real quick, when you listen to the first track, like it sounds like you're listening to Welcome to the Jungle meets Beast to the Harlot, like from the beginning on. It has like a siren in it and everything. So it's clear they were going for that kind of vibe, and I think they nailed it.
yeah, absolutely. So definitely check out Vendetta 13, their new EP that is out and now. You can pick it up now. 4 songs streaming, 6 songs overall if you pick it up in physical copy. Chris, you've got a couple picks for us this week. What do you have for us first?
Yeah, coming back. First time I've been able to have a couple picks here. My first band is called Qarinah with their 4-song EP Transcendent. This is kind of a clash of the United States and Germany. We've got 2 solo acts kind of combining forces, Valdemar Sorichta from Germany and Miss Randall from Portland, Oregon. Miss Randall being an established singer and drummer from the band Rusty Eye. And then Valdemar having, between his solo work and touring with other artists and producing with bands, has worked with bands such as Lacuna Coil, Spine Shake, and even Overkill. For a duo, I feel like we talk a lot about solo acts and a lot about big bands. Maybe we don't touch as much on duos, but for a duo, I think there's a great mixture of heavy riff-driven music here, and then vocals that not only contrast and pair with said riffing in all the right ways, but utilize some beautiful layering at points. I hear groove metal within the backing tracks and some solid solo work from Valdemar. You can hear a lot of Zakk Wylde or Dimebag Darrell-esque squeals in track number 3. And the choruses on all these are solid, and even on just a 4-track EP, it's a very filling product. So with it being one of these EPs, it's one of those where it's like, hey, you just go ahead and listen to the whole thing. It's 13 minutes of your day. Just check it out. Relatively new project. They just had one single last year in December of 2023. So this is kind of their big debut EP, I guess you would say. The track I've gotten lined up for everyone is the opening track, Hell or High Water. So hopefully everybody enjoys.
So let's check that out now. The album is Transcendent. Qarinah, I believe is how you pronounce that. Qarinah, if you're looking for that pronunciation. If you're listening on the audio version of this podcast, is the opening track to that EP, Hell or High Water. Let's listen to that now.
See that economy that's in front of me, inside of me, no exit plan. See
I think the encouraging thing listening to these guys is a lot of times you hear that type of music. When we hear that start, you just think, the singer's going to come in and sound like, whoa. But no, like the singer absolutely kills it. Great vocals, great harmonies there, and it really just works so well with the music that it really makes for an enjoyable listen. So like I said, when I heard the music start, I kind of wondered what it was going to be, but pleasantly surprised. These guys really sound good. Mike, your thoughts on these guys?
Yeah, we've kind of talked about it before, but I think anytime you have female-fronted metal act who doesn't go ultra far into like the symphonic metal route and sticks more to the heavy side, I think you're onto something, and I think that's what they do, and they do it really well.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought they absolutely knocked it out of the park here. Check out Transcendent, their EP from Qarinah. The first pick for Chris this week. Really good stuff there. As always, Chris, you have 2 picks. So what do you have for us for pick number 2?
Yep, number 2 for me is a band from Moscow, not Russia, but Idaho, and that is Silent Theory with their new album, Tell Us How It Ends, 10 songs, 31 minutes. This is a band that formed in 2010. They released 3 studio albums between 2011 and 2021, and then more recently they've had 3 EPs between 2022 and 2024, so this is kind of a return to the long format, I guess. Fun fact, they'll be playing in Lakewood, Ohio soon, October 17th, so potential to go see them live, actually, for us here soon. There's hints of new metal here, mixes of emo. I get feelings of a post-grunge, early 2000s band that I would have been into back in the day. There's a mixture of melodic and harsh vocals, similar to Taproot, heavy riffing and emotional content like that of Earshot, and they've just really pinned down this sound that I've had an interest in for as long as I can remember, and they have the recipe for it just figured out to a T. Standout tracks on this one are the title track, Tell Us How It Ends, songs like Made Me This Way, and then the opener, Emptiness in You, which happens to be the song I've selected for a preview for everyone, if not just so everyone can hear these guys from the beginning, just as I did. So hope everyone enjoys.
Yeah, and this song's obviously done well on YouTube Music, over 1 million plays so far from Silent Theory, so definitely a chance to check these guys out soon. Let's listen to a little bit of Emptiness in You off of Tell Us How It Ends, the opening track for Silent Theory.
Will I be empty? When will it leave me? I don't need closure. Can this be over? Can this be over? Can this be over? I don't know if I'm right, but this is eating me alive. I don't know what else I can do. I know every lie. How can you look me in the eye? All I can see right through the emptiness in you. I kept inhaling.
I definitely see where you got the Taproot vibes there. I definitely kind of heard a little bit of that in there. But yeah, this is another one of those bands that has taken a little bit of something, like you mentioned, a little new metal maybe, but have kind of modernized it in a way that has made it more palatable in one sense, just because I'm not the biggest fan of new metal. But I think these guys really are onto something, obviously, based on the number of listens they've got. Clearly, a lot of people agree, but really good stuff from these guys. I'm looking forward to getting a chance to listen to the whole album, but Silent Theory certainly has done a great job, and only 31 minutes for 10 songs, so it's not going to take you very long to get through this album. They definitely kind of going through a little bit shorter songs, but again, really good stuff. Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's funny. I think if this album had come out maybe 15 years ago, I would have just passed it off as another new metal band, like sounds like all the others, but it's funny what time does when you come back and kind of revisit the sound. I think they do it really well, and I could definitely see myself listening to more of this.
Yeah, definitely. So check these guys out. Silent Theory, again, touring right now, so good chance to see them live, as we talk about all the time. If you get a chance, buy the CDs. If you hear something you like, buy the LPs. Go see them live. Support these guys monetarily if possible, so that they can continue to make awesome music for us to listen to each and every week. I've got 2 picks as well this week. We're going to start off with my first pick, and it is, if I can get through my notes here real quick, This is the first album from an international band. That's what they call themselves, and you'll find out why in a moment. They're a melodic heavy metal band called Timeless Fairytale with the album A Story to Tell. They have a Danish singer, Henrik Brockman. They have an Italian guitarist songwriter, Luca Solito, from the band Stamina. They also have recruited Stamina's bass player, Carmine Vivo, and Swedish drummer Victor Enneblom. They've kind of pulled people from a bunch of different directions to pull this together, but it's really a catchy rock album. It was just really an easy listen from beginning to end. It just has a lot of melody to it, as you would expect from a melodic heavy metal band, borderline AOR type of sound. But it's just, again, I thought this was a really great listen. I really enjoyed the entire album and made it for a very easy pick for me. Standout tracks include Forever and a Day, New Dawn, A Story to Tell, and the song we're going to listen to on the podcast is Emptiness. So we're going to check that out now. So let's check out Timeless Fairytale and their new album, A Story to Tell. This is, I have the wrong song queued up, so let's pull that up real quick.
Wait, no, it isn't.
It was Emptiness, but evidently I must have accidentally gone off of that track. So let's check that out now. Again, this is the 5th track off of the album, Emptiness, from the band Timeless Fairytale and the album A Story to Tell.
I can change my state of mind, feelings that words can describe. I pray for you to come out of your own prison cell, moving on. Memories still running deep and I am on my own. I'm haunted again. Can't believe this is for real, but I still have to face my emptiness.
Again, it has great rock undertones, but you've got the kind of over-the-top melodies and kind of a synth even in there as well. But I really did enjoy this whole album. Mike, your thoughts on these guys?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of anything that has the tag neoclassical power metal associated with it. So I haven't had a lot of time to get around to this whole album, but I'm definitely looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a big one.
Yeah, really, really enjoyed this. Chris, your thoughts on Timeless Fairytale?
I'll just keep it simple with them. I'd listen to that in a stadium for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's just really great sound. Definitely worth checking out. Timeless Fairytale with A Story to Tell, the first album from this international band. Our final pick, or my final pick, but it also is our final pick of the week. We talked earlier on about these bands that have been around a long time, and we're just kind of discovering them, or at least I'm discovering them now. This is the 12th full-length studio album from the legendary German rock band Victory, and the album is Circle of Life. This band was founded in 1984, so this is their 40th anniversary this year. They had some hits in the 80s in the U.S. Obviously, were very popular in Germany. German popularity was certainly among one of the more popular German bands like the Scorpions, Sept, Halloween, Gamma Ray at the time, but they didn't really get the overseas push that those bands did. They ended up breaking up in 1994, got back together in 2003, and they only have one original or sort of original member, and that's Herman Frank. He's the only one that dates back to the 80s. Most of these guys came along in the 2000s when they got back together. They now have a Swiss-born lead singer, Gianna Pontillo, that has found a way to kind of make music that sounds like it comes from a previous generation also sound modern at the same time. I definitely got some Ed Guy vibes off of some of the tracks off of this album, which of course is probably why I enjoyed it so much. Standout tracks include Tonight We Rock, American Girl, Falling, and the album, or the track we're going to listen to off this album, is Virtual Sin. So let's check that out now. That's actually the last track off of this album from Victory. The album is Circle of Life. The track is Virtual Sin. Let's check this out now. He actually picked right at the very end of the end of the song, very end of the album there. But yeah, these guys rocked. I thought the album, so many of these albums we listen to, I feel like they start really strong and they kind of fade out as you get a little deeper into the album. I thought this album just got better and better as it went through, and I really like to listen to more of the back catalog of these guys now that I kind of know how awesome they are. But Mike, your thoughts on Victory?
Yeah, it's not surprising that there's some Ed Guy comparisons there. I feel like Ed Guy is kind of the more modern interpretation of classic German power metal. So I think if you're looking for a more modern take of maybe your classic sound, you might kind of fall into that slot a bit. But no, it sounds really good.
Yeah, definitely enjoyed this for sure. Chris, your thoughts on Victory?
I always appreciate when a vocalist can take care of their voice because, I mean, even with the extensive back catalog they have, to hear that, I imagine that is just as strong as they have ever sound vocally. So amazing to hear that. Very strong, melodic, almost operatic at times.
Yeah, it was just really, really great listen. Again, I think the album from start to finish is one of my favorite ones I've listened to because it is. I listen to so much AOR stuff and melodic stuff. It's nice to have something that doesn't really fall into that category.
Yeah.
So this was definitely that. Definitely encourage you to check out all of our albums this week, but that is Victory, my last pick for this week. So it's time to go into the vault where we're each going to give you a classic album to check out. Of course, we'll get to mine last because we're going to be talking the year 1997, and we'll try to get through it in a reasonable amount of time. We're going to go to Chris first for his vault pick. So, Chris, what do you have for us in the vault this week?
Yeah, I'm straying away from gimmicks as I return to this, and I'm even straying away from a traditional vault style pick for the 100th episode, as this is honestly something that could have been a new music pick for us earlier in the year. So my vault spotlight this week is a guy that's popped up on my radar this year, mainly on Instagram, by the name of Jesse Wells. Almost immediately, I fell in love with his satirical musings and callbacks to classic protest music. He's garnered comparisons to Bob Dylan, but while I personally never got hooked in by Bob Dylan, Jesse Wells is a different story. He's one of these acts that exudes a love for the craft, often recording himself standing out in nature with nothing but his guitar and maybe a harmonica. His July 4th album, Hell's Wells, is the one I'll be spotlighting, and it touches on recent topics like outrage from the Olympics, the passing of some of the Boeing whistleblowers, the fentanyl crisis, and even cancer-causing microplastics. I can relate to Jesse in a lot of ways, mainly because he's my age, a little bit younger than me, but he clearly has an interest in reaching folks through this medium and enjoys it. And I get the feeling that it's not really about the money in any sense. I'll admit that when I first came across him, I thought that he just started doing this and was just a natural at it, which gave me kind of hope as an early 30s guy, kind of telling me like, hey, it's not too late. But then I went to shout his name from the rooftops here and found that he's been doing this since 2012. He originally recorded under the name J.C. Wells, just putting stuff up on SoundCloud and Bandcamp, eventually formed a band called Dead Indian that has since disbanded, and even just went under the moniker Wells for a while. But he's really blown up recently as just Jesse Wells, and he's open for acts like Greta Van Fleet, Dead Sarah, and I even saw he posted recently with John Mellencamp and the Dave Matthews Band. So it's, even though maybe he's not just as much of a natural at it as I thought, he's been doing this for a while. He's really honed his craft, and it gives me hope in a different way than I originally thought. With us doing this podcast, it really speaks to, you put enough time into this, eventually you will get found. I mean, he's gaining new fans like me every day today. What's to say we won't do the same down the road? So everybody go check out Jesse Wells, an amazing musician and some great takes on a lot of different topics of today.
I mean, a lot of these bands that we've discovered over the time doing this podcast are, I mean, some of them, like, we'll see, and they have 1 million views on their videos. The one EP that you chose this week, I think they had like 10, 12 views on their EP. Yeah. So, I mean, you just never know where you're going to discover people or music, and it's always really cool when you kind of find something else out there that you wouldn't have come across. And that's kind of the theme of this podcast each and every week. Mike, I know you're... go ahead, yeah. Oh,
sorry, I was just going to say, he did have a new album just drop on September 20th, so I know we just covered the music of September 13th, so moving ahead, I mean, he very well could be a new music pick for me coming up, so with his album Patchwork.
All right, that'll be something to look at next week potentially. But yeah, so definitely check that out. Mike, I know you are continuing through the alphabet second time through, a little bit different than the first time. But what have you got for us this time?
Yeah, so kind of to repeat the gimmick this time around, I'm going through the list on Wikipedia of glam metal bands, A through Z, and I'm going letter by letter. This week I've moved on to the letter F, and it kind of, the timing was interesting, both because, we're nearing the beginning of October, Halloween season, and I also recently just bought a vinyl of an album that I had on CD already, and I even have the movie to which it's the soundtrack of. But when I got the vinyl in the mail, which I ordered from Real Gone Music, which is a really cool website where you can go and there's a lot of reissue vinyl there. Just if you're looking to collect, it's definitely a cool place to check out. When I got this, I thought, what better time than now to jump into this? So my vault pick this week from 1986 is the fourth studio album from the English hard rock band Fastway. The album is Trick or Treat, and it is the soundtrack to the horror movie Trick or Treat.
I remember the horror movie. I remember Fastway kind of having their moments in time, and I would like to go back and listen to this whole album because I'm sure it's pretty fantastic. And my guess is I kind of have a feeling what it's going to sound like for it to be the soundtrack of this horror movie.
Oh, yeah. And first off, not to be confused with the Trick or Treat from, 2010, 2008, whatever year that was, the horror movie that was certainly likely way more popular than than this movie. But, the band was formed in 1982. It features Motorhead guitarist Fast Eddie Clark and UFO bassist Pete Way. Both have been kind of disgruntled with their bands and decided to link up. They recruited the Humble Pie drummer Jerry Shirley, and then Dave King, who wasn't really anybody at that point in time, but would eventually go on to form the band Flogging Molly and be their frontman.
Oh, okay.
This is just, first off, the movie's ridiculous. It basically involves this high school kid that's bullied, but he also works for this local radio station, and he has this rock star who's kind of his idol, and the rock star dies, but his coworker at the radio station, played by Gene Simmons, because why not?
Why not?
Gives him this unreleased, reel-to-reel recording of this album that was going to come out, oddly enough called Songs in the Key of Death, which is also the name of the Blood Opera album.
Yeah.
But, he listens to it backwards and gets possessed by this singer and starts terrorizing people. I need to go back and rewatch it. It's been over 20 years since I have, but it's so ridiculous. The main character, I don't remember the show Family Ties all that well, but he was like the nerdy friend of Michael J. Fox. That's who plays the main character. But yeah, it also has Ozzy Osbourne, which is kind of funny because Ozzy Osbourne just plays this bit role as like a televangelist, like talking about how terrible metal music is
now.
But they marketed it basically like, hey, this is a movie with Ozzy Osbourne and Gene Simmons, and they're not all that important characters, honestly.
Probably why a lot of people didn't go see it, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately not. But standout tracks on the album include the title track, Trick or Treat, After Midnight, Don't Stop the Fight, If You Could See. It's just really great, kind of early, mid-'80s hard rock. Definitely worth a listen.
Yeah, I vaguely remember the movie now that you described the plot. I feel like I have seen it or seen some of it at some point many, many years ago. It might be worth... If we ever get to the point where we have a big Discord community, that would be kind of fun to do a watch-along on Discord of that movie and probably every other movie that people need to see to, understand our sense of humor. But yeah, I definitely would like to go back and check out the whole album and... listen to what they have, but good stuff for sure. All right, we're talking the year 1997 on the Vault. Again, this all started many weeks ago now. Back in the first year we did was 1969 with Chicago Transit Authority. Their debut album, of course, they became the band Chicago. And we've gone year by year, and I've picked the best albums. And as we've gotten into the 90s, unfortunately or fortunately, there are so many albums that kind of influenced us or are worth a mention that this segment has kind of taken on a life of its own. I'm going to try to go through as quickly as possible, and then I know Mike will have a few of these that are on his list, but if there's any that I miss that he wants to point out, we'll let him do that.
I cut back my list considerably.
Yeah. But I'm going to go through these quick because I do have some that are only really worth a mention. And then we'll get to my actual pick. Days of the New, their debut studio album came out, of course. Touch, Peel, and Stand was probably their best-known song off of that album. They also had The Downtown and Shelf in the Room as other hits off of that, but that was their debut album in 1997. The Color and the Shape, the second studio album from the Foo Fighters. I don't know why they haven't been in the news lately. Monkey Wrench, My Hero, Everlong, off of that album. Really great follow-up to their debut album that we talked about a couple weeks ago. Really great stuff from them. Marcy Playground is kind of
Oh my God.
1997 with the
So
song
terrible.
Sex and Candy. Wasn't even the first single off of that album. It was the third. That song is not great, but it's also very memorable. So,
More evidence that anything could be a hit in like the mid to late 90s.
man, there's going to be some more of that, I think, unless I didn't pull them all up. Somewhere more familiar, the second studio album from the alternative rock band Sister Hazel came out, which included All For You, which is certainly one of their biggest songs. But that was a band that was, I think, a little more talented than what they got credit for, because they did a cover of was the Eagles, or they did a cover of somebody on some collection. I thought it was really
Them
good.
or Fleetwood Mac or something.
I think it was Fleetwood Mac. Now that you say that, why did this disappear? All Wound Up, the debut album from Godsmack, and this is interesting. I only mention it casually here. We'll talk more about it next week, because this album was then basically, they were picked up by a major label, and the entire album was re-released in 1998 as Godsmack. So we're not going to talk.
Not aware of that.
I was not either. So we won't talk about it too much, because this album is awesome and it will come up next week. But it was originally released in 1997, is All Wound Up, before it was re-released in 1998. So we'll talk about it next week. Kingdom of Madness. I know that's one that's on your list, from Ed Guy. These guys are really kind of getting into their rhythm here with their second album. Ed Guy's awesome. You should just listen to this whole album. They will probably be a pick in a few weeks when we get to the 2000s. We'll talk about that soon. The debut album from Savage Garden came out in 1997, and I mean, I Want You, To the Moon and Back, Truly, Madly, Deeply. They had 8 singles off of that album.
That's shocking.
Like, obviously did very well for those guys. Here in the Now Frontier, from Queensryche in 1997. How you feel about that album probably varies from Queensryche fan to Queensryche fan, but Sign of the Times, Spool off of that album, but certainly worth a mention. My Own Prison, the debut album from Creed in 1997. Obviously, My Own Prison, What's This Life For, and One.
That's a great album.
That is a great album from Creed. They're going to come up again in a couple of weeks when we get around to Human Clay in 1999. Visions, the sixth studio album from Stradivarius, came out in 1997. These I just want to mention because these guys are awesome, and you should definitely keep an eye on Stradivarius. I believe they're going to come up again in a couple of weeks as well. We get to my favorite song by Stradivarius, Cryptic Writings, seventh studio album from Megadeth. Obviously, the whole album's awesome because they're awesome, but some of my favorites on this album include Trust, Almost Honest, Use the Man, Secret Place, but the whole thing is great. Definitely check that out. The Fat of the Land, which is the third studio album from the English electronic music group The Prodigy, came out, which most notably for our podcast purposes, Firestarter off of that album. Probably two of their biggest hits off of that album. Where Have All the Merrymakers Gone? The debut studio album from Harvey Danger came out in 1997. Really only notable for Flagpole Sitta. That's one of those songs I probably did not enjoy in 1997, but I think as I've gotten older,
If I hear it on satellite radio now, I'm listening to it.
100%.
Oddly enough.
Yep. Shrinking the Blob, which is the first full-length album by the post-grunge band Oleander,
Oh, okay.
which came out in 1997, which is Why I'm Here was their big track off of that album.
I know that song, but I've never heard that album name before.
I haven't either. I was like, what is this album? Sehnsucht, the album from Rammstein, which, of course, has Du Hast on there. Really kind of their moment where they broke free in the U.S. and
Great album.
great album, front to back. Those guys are awesome. Reload. Obviously, we talked about Load last week. We're going to talk about Reload. Definitely worth checking out. The Memory Remains, The Unforgiven 2, Fuel, Better Than You. But again, should listen to the whole thing. really good stuff, and certainly controversial a little bit in their sellout phase, if you will. But definitely worth checking out. Sixpence None the Richer, the third studio album from the band, which of course included Kiss Me and There She Goes. Huge songs.
Absolutely.
In 1997. Probably the one that was the closest to being picked for me was Ixnay on the Hombre, the fourth studio album from The Offspring. I love The Offspring. This is a great album. The singles were All I Want, Gone Away, The Meaning of Life, and I Choose. But these guys are great. This album was great. And like I said, this was probably the closest one that I nearly picked because they're really fantastic. The album I picked, as we talked about, these aren't the albums we pick for this aren't always necessarily the biggest album or the best new album, but the album that was kind of most important to us at that given time. And as a few weeks ago, I picked Hell Freezes Over from the Eagles, which was their re-debut kind of on the scene, and knew that that was important because it really got me into the Eagles, and I really became a super fan. This album that came out in 1997 was the album that got me into this band. This is the live album, The Dance, from Fleetwood Mac. It was a chance for them to reunite their most famous lineup. They had not released an album together since 1987's Tango in the Night, so it had been 10 years since they had put something out. It was the first Fleetwood Mac release to top the U.S. charts since 1982's Mirage. It came with a live DVD, and that's really where I kind of got to know the band from that. But, I mean, it's all their big hits. The Chain, Dreams, Everywhere, Rhiannon, I'm So Afraid, Temporary One, Bleed to Love Her, Big Love, Landslide, Say You Love Me, My Little Demon, Silver Springs, You Make Lovin' Fun, Sweet Girl, Go Your Own Way, Tusk, and Don't Stop is the list on that. They had three singles that came out of that. Silver Springs ended up becoming this big, huge song, probably much bigger than when they first recorded it. But this was basically where I discovered Fleetwood Mac and kind of really got into their music. So that's why, in the end, even though a lot of these were re-releases, the live album was so well done, they brought in the USC Marching Band for Tusk at the end. They stuck around to play Don't Stop to wrap up the show. But again, it's a really big album for me, so that's why it's my pick for the vault for this week. I know there's a few maybe that I didn't catch on your list. What'd you have for us?
Yeah, my abbreviated list, you caught the majority of them.
Which is good.
I also listed Cold Chamber's debut, Collective Soul's Discipline Breakdown, Aerosmith 9 Lives, and Him Greatest Love Songs Volume 666.
Okay, so good stuff there as well. So 1997, another great year in music. I'm certainly interested to see what we're going to find when we get to 1998 next week, because I'm sure the great music is going to continue. What is not going to continue is this episode of the Nerdcast Empire, as we have reached the end of the Nerdcast Empire. Episode 100 is now in the books. We really appreciate everybody for joining us, whether you joined us live on twitch.tv/Nerdcast Empire, whether you joined us on the VOD or on the podcast version. We really appreciate it. Here's to another 100 episodes or more of the Nerdcast Empire. Big thanks to Chris for joining us. Big thanks to Mike for not only joining us, but putting all this stuff together each and every week. Big thanks to everyone who joined us in the chat. It's just been awesome, these first 100 episodes, and looking forward to continuing on bigger and better for the Nerdcast Empire in the future. Quick announcements. Thursday night, Anime Thursdays, we're going to be talking OhioCon. Believe it or not, there's a venue and a date. What does that mean? I don't know. We're going to talk about it Thursday. We're going to talk about NXT on CW on Thursday. We're going to talk about looking back at 100 episodes and kind of our thoughts on that coming up on Thursday. And then next Sunday, we'll be back with another Music Weekly with the music of September the 20th. So big thanks to Stoveleg Media for all their support across 100 episodes. And a big thanks to you, the listener, once again. That's going to wrap things up. For the entire crew, I'm Matt saying so long. Don't forget to join the Empire, the Nerdcast Empire.